Hello and welcome to the Sales Code Leadership Podcast. My name is Kevin Teeler. I'm the founder of Sales Code and the host of the podcast. And this week, I'm delighted to introduce the former president of techUK, the current president of Digital Leaders, one of the most famous women in the tech sector, and also a renowned sales leader who even interviewed me for a job more than 10 years ago. So I'm turning the tables today. Jacqueline de Rojas, welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. What an honor to be here, and great to connect with you again.
Well, it's absolute pleasure. Well, I didn't mean actually to give you your full title, which is with the CBE at the end.
Yes, that was also a great honor and something I wasn't expecting. So amazing and humbling, and also something that made me want to work harder for diversity, for technology and trade, and all the good things that I care about in life.
When did you receive that award?
2018.
And who gave it to you?
So I had the wonderful Prince William.
Oh, really?
Mm,
Oh,
I did. And he's an extraordinary person who I think all the royal family, the working royal family, are very good at data and understanding who they're talking to, empathy, engagement, all the things that we need to be in sales, of course, but they are brilliant at their craft. And I was very impressed. In fact, he did say to me that George was very interested in coding. And I said, I do rather hope that Charlotte is as well.
Oh, yeah, really good point. We'll come back onto that. That's a really important topic. You're the second person I've had on the podcast who's received an honour from the royal family. Previous guests included Penny Power OBE. Do you know Penny Power?
Yes. Yes. And she's a of nature and does a lot together with her husband, I believe.
That's right. Thomas Power. They founded, actually, she described herself as having founded LinkedIn before LinkedIn, which is a great web. And they did, actually. I remember that very well. Well, it's great to have you on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. Let's get stuck into some interesting discussion for the benefit of the listener then. What is it you get paid to do today, Jacqueline?
That's interesting. So I am more of a tapas girl than a full English, I would describe myself as. So I like to dip in and out of projects, and I have a portfolio career today. So I sit on the board of 3 publicly listed companies, FDM Group, which is all about tech skills, Costain, which is national infrastructure, and Rightmove, which is, an amazing addiction for me, but it is brilliant as a tech success in the UK. And then I sit on the board of a private equity company called IFS, which is a big contender to Oracle and is in the field asset management space and adjacent pieces. But also I sit as chair of the Institute of Coding. That's actually unpaid. So you asked me what was paid and what was, and I suppose the unpaid piece is also quite interesting. So Institute of Coding, Digital Leaders, and President Emeritus at techUK, as you mentioned. So there's a lot that I do outside of work, and more into what I wake up in the morning and care about deeply.
What is it that you really care about then? What is it that motivates you to take those assignments?
I think I'm at an age, I'm 60 now, where I will only do things that bring me joy. And I choose board appointments where I love the culture and I can see that they are strategic and moving forward in an accelerated way. So that's how I make my choices about what I do. And then in terms of what I wake up in the morning and care about, I care about diversity and inclusion. I think I care about it not just because it's a noble cause. Women, of course, hold up half the sky, but I passionately believe that it's important who's writing our digital future, because if our voices are not at the table when we're designing, building, implementing, testing all of this tech, then we are in danger of creating a future that doesn't work for everyone. So that's what I worry about. especially as technology is escalating so fast and our dependency on tech is growing ever more strongly. So we need to be diverse. Our best ideas come from innovative teams that look outwards, not inwards.
We should come back to the AI topic a bit later in this discussion, I think. Is this in any way, shape, or form the career that you had in mind at 16?
No, I wanted to. No, not at all. I wanted to. First of all, I wanted to be an air hostess, and then I went on a plane and decided I didn't want to be that. But can't imagine why. And then I always wanted to be a newscaster on the BBC. I thought making important declarations on the 6 o'clock news, as it was then, was going to be the career of choice, but that wasn't to be. Tech found me, I think, before I had a chance to do that.
You think it's too late to get yourself on GB News?
GB News would not be my choice.
But it seems to be where all the old semi-retired newsreaders pop up, doesn't it? Interesting.
Yeah, space. I think so. But I have to say that I haven't made it to being a newscaster on the BBC, but technology has given me a platform to use my voice for the things I care about. And I have delivered hundreds of speeches, and really delighted that I probably got the best of all worlds, because it has given me this opportunity to share and at least raise questions, be a bit provocative, and nudge people in a direction that is positive, I think.
So after the air hostess career, the venture into at least thinking about being a newsreader, how did you make your way into sales? How did that happen? And then into the tech sector?
Well, it started when I came back. I did my degree in Germany, and I came back to London needing to earn some money. And I was offered a role in a technology recruitment company where, putting people into jobs, selling people, that was quite tricky because your product talks and you have to learn quite quickly how to sell a talking product that has an opinion of its own, and
might change its mind at the last minute and decide not to take that damn job.
Exactly. Yeah. So after 2 years, I went to work for my largest client, which happened to be a British-based startup that was growing incredibly fast in the AS400 space.
Oh, yes. Remember that well.
System 36, yes. System 38, and then AS400, standalone sort of environment. It was so exciting and fast-growing. And because I spoke German, they gave me the Germanic region to manage, because I was the only person that could figure out what they wanted and what we needed in their language. And so it's interesting that languages became the way that I got into technology. And I never looked back, because I never worked for any other sector. I always worked for technology companies after that. So that's how I fell into the technology industry. And then, running the channel, first of all, which was a third-hand way of selling technology. So it was indirect sales. And then I came back into sales because I loved it. I loved the opportunity to take technology to the masses at scale. That was how I got into sales.
What about selling itself, though? What is it you love about that?
Do you know what? I am endlessly curious. And I think one of the transferable skills for any salesperson, sales leader, sales manager, or business development person is that they are great at asking questions and listening.
Yeah, those are the two parts of the equation. Some more junior salespeople seem to forget the second part of the equation, don't they?
Well, they do. And actually, it's not just juniors. I think as humans, we often throw out questions and don't listen to the answers with the intensity that we could. And I have found that the listening part has probably brought me more than the question part. Although I am endlessly curious, as I said, and I do have a notebook, which is called World Class Questions, and it is my collection of world-class questions, and I listen to land them, and sometimes I just fall in love with them and put them in my questions book.
But that's not published, though, I assume. I mean, I can't get my hands on that.
No, it's private, but I wonder whether that would be a thing. Thank you, Kevin, for that entrepreneurial idea.
I think it would be a thing. Absolutely. I think it'd be a great thing.
Mm.
I remember years ago going on a training course, sales training program. It's a big thing of mine. I do some sales training, a lot of coaching. And one of the courses I went on many years ago when companies would invest in sales training for people at scale was called question-based selling. Never forget that. So it's a very powerful way. You're absolutely right. Because good salespeople, as you know, generally more consultative than prescriptive. So they're much more likely to ask questions, solve problems. That seems to be a skill that you've honed and developed during your whole career.
Yes, and I found it to be the shortest route to success. Right. I recall the industry that I joined was very alpha. There was a lot of testosterone in the culture that I joined, and I probably worked in quite a lot of steely edged sales organizations with steely edged management and leaders. And I found that if I was going to succeed, it would take a different way of selling other than the option is throw mud at the wall and hope some of it sticks. Mm-hmm. So the show up and throw up piece around what we had and I'm hoping you want it didn't really work for me. So asking questions, being more consultative, it made me more ruthless in the customers that I spoke to. So I probably spoke to fewer, but much more deeply. And it also forced me to curate a network of relationships that went in and out of requirement at any one time. But over the years, I could keep going back and understanding what they needed and probably knew their cycles almost better than they did, understood their problems probably better than they did, together with my team. It wasn't just me, but I had an amazing support team, pre-sales team, business development team that were also very highly consultative. And I think we got to a 1 + 1 = 11 on that. And that was really an incredibly effective group effort in terms of making sales cycles extremely short, especially in the new name, new business world.
You seem to have moved up into management and leadership quite quickly. Is that you didn't spend 10 years carrying a bag as an enterprise sales rep for a tech company, if I'm right?
No, but you do spend a lot of time saving others. I think in the sales world, and I wonder if anyone else who's listening to this certainly will think, well, actually, we did always have our fingerprints on the tricky deals, the unhappy customer situations, which we always turned into opportunities, and also the very large transactions that our forecasts depended on, because whether we chose to manage expectations properly or not, the higher ups certainly depended on big transactions, which sometimes were binary and is a dangerous game. But, we had to do whatever it took to close the deal.
You were always quite hands-on then.
I think, firstly, if you have such a thrill and you miss it, I miss it if I'm not close to the field. And there is also a little bit of you become less grounded. You don't understand the issues in the field if you don't stay close. On the other hand, I did learn, and I learned this lesson, I'm going to say late 1998 or 99, where empowering my team and stepping back, not always being there, created much better outcomes because frankly they were better at it. And it's a mistake to think you've got the best ideas. It's a mistake to think you've got the best strategy in the room, because the teams that if you believe in the people that you've hired, then unlocking their potential, creating space for them to be amazing is perhaps the biggest lesson, and the leap from management to leadership. That's when I think that transition happens. And certainly in my case, I could afford to be more ambassadorial, more thematically leading versus telling them how to do things.
And when did you first make that leap then from management into leadership? When did that happen?
I think when I was told in '99 that I'd gone for a role, and I was running a very large sales organization, hundreds of people, felt I was pretty successful, and I didn't get the job because someone who was much more junior got the job. He got the job, I didn't, and I was told when I asked for feedback, we simply don't put women on the leadership team.
You're kidding. That's what they told you.
Quite shocking, isn't it?
Yes.
But actually, so my resilience said to me at the time, okay, that's hard to hear. I'm resigning, which I did. But I did also challenge myself to look for the miracle, which I always do in a situation where something bad has happened, a door has slammed or whatever. Where's my accountability in this? Did I have a role to play in this? And maybe I did, actually. Maybe it wasn't just that they didn't put women on the leadership team. Maybe I just wasn't ready. I don't know. But what I got from that scenario was, firstly, I realized that at least he told me, because if he hadn't told me, I would have been banging my head against the glass ceiling for another 5 years, and that would not have been good. Second thing that happened was I went and got myself a job as my own managing director role in a large company called Informix, which subsequently was sold to IBM for $1 billion. So that wasn't a bad outcome. And, I do think that sometimes it's just time, and it was time to move on anyway. However, it does also mean that it said to me that sometimes life is unfair. Sometimes it just is. And that I had to deal with that. We have to deal with that sometimes. It's a difficult one emotionally, but I think you can always get something out of situations like that if you look at it from a different perspective.
So what is leadership for you, Jacqueline?
Leadership for me is mostly getting out of the way, but it's also I think
I've never had that response before to that question. I love that. Getting out of the way. Yeah.
Getting out of the way. There is usually, if you give it oxygen, there's usually a really fired up organization that can do incredibly good things. For me, leadership is about setting intention for the group, setting the direction of travel, and then supporting the team to be the best that they can be. It's also a lot about what you're not going to do versus what you are going to do. Less is definitely more in leadership. And that's how I find that, it's about sponsoring people into the organization. It's about getting people from average to good to great, especially in sales, because that's a force multiplier in your outcome. And it's also about creating collaboration, community, ensuring that, of course, there are superheroes in sales, but how do you create an organization that is functionally dependent on each other so that you do get this force multiplier in the teams and not just a collection of superheroes who, win the day mostly. I don't know that if your listeners might be interested. There's an amazing TED talk by Margaret Heffernan, and it's all about super chickens. We should put the link with the podcast.
Oh, because, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It talks about how there is an experiment, and I'm probably going to get this completely wrong, but the gist of it is that there is a group of super chickens, and then there's a group of normal chickens all laying eggs, and the super chickens get to such a state where they are brilliantly laying, five eggs a day, but they're so competitive that they start to peck each other to death. Whereas The normal chickens, they're very stable, one egg a day, and they live in a community of amazing harmony, and they get to, collectively a much larger output. So it's quite interesting. But yes, definitely recommend the Margaret Heffernan Super Chickens TED Talk.
You give advice, as you say, paid and quite often unpaid, to lots of upcoming, let's say women, possibly sales leaders. I'm sure you've been asked that question. If you were asked by a woman who was getting a first job as a sales leader in a growing tech company where to focus predominantly in the first 90 days, let me give you 3 cards to play and see which one you would pick. So you're told you can either say, I would start with culture, which is about people, or I would focus on strategy, which is about planning, or I go straight to execution, which is about process. What advice would you give to that upcoming female sales leader?
So it depends on how long said sales leader had been in the business. Because I would assume, actually that's not true. I'd assume whether, certainly when I'm making a choice about joining a business, culture is my first go-to. Culture is a reason I would join and also a reason I would leave. So probably if they've done their homework properly, that one is a base assumption that the culture is what it needs to be, unless you've been brought in specifically to change it or be part of the change. Mm-hmm. So, but the culture card would probably be my first one. And without question, execution would be my last.
Oh, would it? Okay.
Yeah.
Don't rush into action. Is that what you're saying? Take a bit of time to step back and think about it.
Yeah, I think strategy in the middle, because you've got to know where you're going. So, I'm all about understanding the direction of travel, because also, it's a bit hare and tortoise, isn't it? That if you start executing straight away, then I think you could be activity versus productivity kind of person. And that I've never been. So no. I'd take a little bit of time. I wouldn't take a lot of time. I'd take a little bit of time.
Interesting. Nice response. I think my mistake has been jumping into action too quickly. I know why that is. And that's a lot to do with my personality type. Actually, you and I, we share this interest in Clifton strengths, don't we? We talked about that before. I found out Achiever was in my top 5, which means I'm throwing myself into action too quickly, really. So I agree with you. Take some time to step back and think about it. On the culture point, though, can you have a sales culture which is independent of a company culture? Can you have a happy, successful sales culture in a company which perhaps doesn't have a supportive company culture?
I think I've seen it all. And I think definitely you can have separate cultures in lots of different sectors of an organization. Where I have seen the difference is that certainly in lots of technology companies, the sales culture is quite dominating, I would suggest. And if it isn't, then maybe sales isn't important and maybe it's not thriving. I don't know. But I have found that culture in sales organizations has been quite strong, but mostly dependent on the leadership and who set the tone. So the leaders are the ones who, they lead by example, good or bad. And they set the tone, they show their teams what exemplary sales performance looks like, feels like, how it's rewarded. Usually it's got lots of coaching and development in it if it's a positive culture, continuous learning, trust, motivating teams, motivating each other. And usually in sales, it's very mission focused. We're all going up over the hill. And that's how sometimes we can get impossible things done in sales. And I love that idea that it's not possible, but yet we achieve it again and again and again. That's leadership. That's the leadership gap, yes. I think.
When you first became a sales leader, it was a few years ago, I think about 20 years ago, I think you said, right? And I guess
maybe longer.
Maybe longer. In those days, it would have been incredibly rare to have a woman in that role, wouldn't it? In fact, there weren't even that many women in sales teams in the tech sector, to my recollection. But to have a female sales leader 20 odd years ago would have been really extremely rare, wasn't it? What was your recollection?
I think I was the only one. We might have had a couple in the, because I worked in very large organizations, but we weren't many. And I am going to say that I was quite, there's something about human nature which needs to fit in to culture. And so I did find myself being quite alpha. I wonder if you remember that. Quite alpha in my management style.
I think when I met you, I was actually very impressed. You seem pretty relaxed, actually. Your reputation had been as quite tough. I remember fairly well, actually. But I thought you were pretty relaxed, actually. I was surprised. I'd expected someone who was I could see there was clearly a lot of steel. I think you've had to have that steely backbone to get where you've got to. And I always felt there was perhaps a iron fist in a velvet glove approach, right? But I saw a lot more of the velvet glove, actually. The reason I remember the interview to some degree, and the reason I didn't take it was not because of you, actually. It was because me personally, I never wanted to work for a big organization. I've always stayed away from them. All right. And the company I interviewed at was a pretty big American software company, if you remember.
Yeah.
I thought by then, it seemed to me that you had it was a pretty good team approach. The interview was quite relaxed. So yeah, I thought it was pretty fun, really. Maybe some of the hard edges have been rubbed off you by the time I got to meet you first.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly evolved. I think I jumped from management to leadership and understood that, there was nothing wrong with taking the edges off, being a bit softer. And actually, it was not about being soft. I don't think it was about being more authentic and less alpha, because that's what the culture demanded at that point.
Yeah.
And I realized that being a reflection of what our customers needed and what our people needed, and creating that culture of empowerment created significantly better results. So, because it's quite hard to pretend to be alpha, or quite hard to be tough all the time. And I chose, I think, to not leave dead bodies around me. And it was very freeing. But yeah, there was a moment in time where I guess there would be people around me who wish they hadn't worked for me. And I apologize to all of those people who think that.
We'll note that on the show notes.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome indeed. Having said that, after 20 years, things have changed. A lot more female role models in business generally. I think at one point we had a female head of state, female prime minister. I mean, just you could see it everywhere, couldn't you? It seemed like women were finally taking over the world, as in that famous Two Ronnies sketch of a few years ago. And yet, I still find it difficult to get the gender balance right on my podcast, which, as you know, is mainly sales leaders, revenue leaders in the tech sector. Why is it that women are perhaps still not coming into sales, or at least not in the tech sector? And what can we do to change that, do you think?
It's very interesting. I don't know if it's just sales, I don't know if it's just tech, but, pressured roles, like it or lump it, women are nurturing families and still the mainstay of family life. And I think it is hard. It's really hard to do it all. And I would not want women to walk away from this podcast thinking she's got it all, she's had it all. It was still hard. And bear in mind, when I was bringing up a family and working, you had to be at work to work. The mobile phone had not been invented.
It's incredible for people to reflect on this. People listening to it go, what, no mobile phones? Wow.
Yeah, no mobility of any kind, no LinkedIn, no, you had to go and collect compliment slips from, the receptions of offices to figure out who your customers were. And now you've got, I work with companies where we have so many sales resources where you can automatically be fed the contract start and end dates of these big, transactions. And, there's a lot of things in the public domain. It was nothing like that before. And I don't know whether it's better or worse, but certainly, for women, or let's say for parents, it's not just women. There are lots of very engaged fathers or single father, single parents who are male. It is hard to do it all, and so we've got to find the opportunity, and I do think government has a part to play in terms of childcare, which is very expensive. In tech, we're a bit more blessed because the wages are higher. However, the cost of childcare is insane. It's insane, and so we haven't solved that particular problem for either gender of parents that we're talking about. And I think that's something that we really do need to look at. We were lucky at some companies who had creches, but it's very tricky indeed. And I have to say, it has not been tackled properly. We need to do more about that. It's not helpful. And also the pressure. Can you also expect people to operate under pressure and have all the pressure at home as well? Again, it's sales and tech sales. There's a lot that rides on us every 90 days or every 30 days in some cases, or 7 days in other cases. It's very, very difficult to have this constant pressure of weekend, month end, quarter end.
Can we talk about the future of sales a bit?
Mm.
Because both you and I, we come into the industry, we're similar kind of age. I think you're looking a lot better on it than me for the people that are watching the audio and visual version of the podcast. But we came in the industry at a similar kind of time. And I've seen a lot of changes in sales over that period. I'm interested to know what your perspective is on what's changed and what's likely to change, particularly reflecting on, obviously, artificial intelligence, which all these things, as you say, just didn't exist at all. We had to rely on our own intelligence when we started selling. What are your thoughts about what's changed and what the future looks like?
Generative AI is so incredible. I don't know if any of your listeners have not played with ChatGPT or Hey Pi or something like that, then I would encourage you to do it because it's so powerful and more powerful than you can ever imagine. In the sales cycle, I think we will see quite a lot of changes. I think we will see the opportunity for customers to self-diagnose problems. I think, understanding what business value you can get from technology. I think there will be a series of prompts that will enable you to understand what you need. And prompt engineering, arguably, is going to be a skill that salespeople should be very good at. I heard an data analyst say the other day that they'd stopped only looking at software engineers in a generative AI sense, because one of the big transferable skills from salespeople is their ability to ask questions. And therefore, salespeople were brilliant at what we call prompt engineering. And these are the questions that feed generative AI engines. And so I think the future is quite bright for salespeople if they take the opportunity to learn what's possible with generative AI. But I think we'll be able to translate what the customer wants into what they need. I think that's certainly coming. I think they'll be able to build demonstrations, probably, proactively, and then probably convert the demo into some kind of, mock-up for the client. Change massively in terms of what's required from the salespeople. There will be a lot more subtlety, but it will all be in relationship. And arguably that's where it should be anyway. But that's where I think we're headed, if that's helpful.
It is. I'm a great optimist and a tech enthusiast like you. Excuse me. My early introduction to tech was watching Star Trek. And I was this wonderfully exciting vision of the future. It's very diverse, great technology, exploring new worlds, wonderful artificial intelligence. So I'm kind of hoping that AI is going to do that for sales, at least, and for humanity in general. But I think with sales specifically, it can liberate us to be human-centered salespeople again, because I've seen in the intervening period between when you and I started and where we are now, the middle piece of selling the past 10 years since the internet, it's become a bit over-processized to me, a little bit too scientific. And the human edge that you and I bring, that sales people bring, it's perhaps been lost a little bit. And I'm hoping that AI is going to liberate us, as you say, to be human-centered salespeople again. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and but I think that's it. I think the human to human connection, the relationship, is where you'll create competitive advantage. But customers are also looking for you to understand their problems, their agenda, what you bring from what you've seen with other clients, your horizon scanning of what's coming next. It's all about preparing them for what comes next. So it's not just solving the immediate problem, but being able to think about what comes next for the customer. I think that's where the real value is going to be. And it's going to be things that, generative AI can't do necessarily. It's going to be the empathy, the problem solving, because it's only, generative AI is nothing to be afraid of, because actually what it does is it gives you current data scenarios, but it's not necessarily going to be the piece that will understand context and what happens next. So I definitely feel that it's limited by its data, but also set free by its data. But I do think the human angle will be incredibly positive in relationship terms. And that's where we've got to focus. We can't be lazy with our listening. We can't be lazy with our questioning. And we've got to probably project the customer forward versus solving just immediate problems that they're facing.
What are your thoughts about Britain as a technology leader at this juncture? I'm really interested in that, because we live in a country where, we kind of invented, well, Tim Berners-Lee didn't quite invent the internet, but invented hypertext, didn't he? We live in a country where the Alan Turing kind of almost invented the foundations for the modern computer. There's so much rich history of technological innovation. What are your thoughts about the future of Britain at this point in that space?
Yeah, so I think that the UK, I'm definitely a tech optimist. I think we have got a robust and thriving technology industry. We've definitely been a significant player in the global tech scene. We definitely have a strong presence in areas like software development, artificial intelligence, fintech, cybersecurity, gaming. And there are, it's not just these areas. There are geographical areas like London and Cambridge and Manchester that all are prominent technology hubs. And we've attracted huge amounts of investor and VC capital into the country, probably twice the amount in the UK than the whole of the rest of Europe. So this is a place where a lot of money has been invested. We've got big universities and research institutes here. We've got government support, which is growing, because I think Rishi Sunak is absolutely all over AI and its opportunity. And I also think that we have the tech talent, which is so exciting. We've always had a country full of innovative ideas, mostly because we've invited migrant populations to come into the UK, and we've created this amazing 1 + 1 = 11 with all of this innovative ideas and startup culture. So I definitely think we are brilliant in lots and lots of areas, but landscape constantly evolves. And so what changes that landscape is how effective are our policies, how effective are economic changes, investment, what's global competition doing to influence the industry, and also, what are we doing on our immigration policy to continue to have that stream of tech talent be excited about the UK. But one of the things I do love about this country is that, sorry, I'm ranting, is that we've got the best time zone in the world. You know, we've got Europe all day long, we've got Asia in the morning, we've got America in the evening, and we've got, you know, a currency which is relatively stable. So, you know, I do believe that there are thousands of reasons why this is a great place to innovate. We have to stay on top of our game, though. This is not a slam dunk. And so, what the government does next, what industries do next, and what regulation does next will change how we walk forward in the technology industry, I believe.
Exciting times ahead.
I think so.
Do you think you would rather have been starting your sales career now or when you started it with all this exciting tech stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, I loved growing up in tech, and I would not change a moment of it. A lot of it was really tough, really hard. But you know what? Sometimes that's what makes you. And I wouldn't change it now. I think I would have liked to have had some of the tools and resources that sales teams have today. And for anybody listening, I would say, if you are one of these people that doesn't really take advantage of sales resources that your companies offer you, I'd go and take a look, because they can shorten your route to success exponentially. So I'd encourage you to do that.
What's the one thing you wish you knew at the beginning of your career?
That's a great question, and I've answered it before in the sense that I had a childhood and an upbringing that was really tough. And I did learn to be very resilient. I learned to be a survivor. And I think what I wished I had understood in my early career was that it was not weak to ask for help, that vulnerability can be your fortress. Culturally, I'm not sure that would have worked in the climate that I was operating in. So I think, of course, it would be that. But when I also look back, and if you're asking me if there's anything else I wished I knew, I think I wished I hadn't. I wish I knew that life could sometimes be unfair. I wished I'd known that, because when it was unfair and hit me in the face like a big fat kipper, I think it took me down, and recovery was quite hard. Not that I ever showed it, but there's a lot of internalizing that goes on, and I never really had access to huge amounts of mentors that people have today, and that does make a difference. And I guess I wish I'd been a mentor earlier and understood how much of a difference it can make when someone is just listening, not necessarily offering solutions, but just listening, because it's very powerful. And anybody can be a mentor. You don't have to be at the top of your career. Anybody can do that for somebody else. And generosity is a really underrated gift to people. And I would say that if you do have the opportunity to just sit and listen to someone who's struggling a bit, then offer the hand of support, because it can make or break someone's day, someone's career, or someone's career choice.
Well, it's been a lovely conversation. I've only got time for one last question. Bearing in mind all you've got on your table, I mean, you seem to have like 9 jobs, a bunch of paid and unpaid work, and mentoring, listening, speaking, doing endless speeches. What is it you do to unwind at the end of a busy day, Jacqueline?
Okay, so EastEnders is my guilty secret. I'm going to just put that on the
That's
table.
Another answer I was not expecting to hear from you. Really?
Oh, absolutely. I love it.
Fantastic. Wow.
Oh my God. I'm an avid, I never miss an episode.
Right. I'm an Archers man myself, but then I'm just
that sounds very sophisticated.
I don't know.
But it keeps me grounded. It just takes me to a place of just not having to think too much. But actually, my husband is trained as a yoga and meditation teacher, and we practice yoga together, and he encourages me to meditate. My mind is so busy that I find that quite hard, but I do take the opportunity to do it. And when I do it, it makes such a big difference to how grounded I am. And I love that. That's what I do to unwind. And of course, I have my amazing grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren now, and they force me to unwind and not think about anything else. You can't do that with a mobile phone in your hand.
Listen, thank you so much for a lovely conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
And thank you to the listener. Please do give us a review if you like what you heard, because it helps to boost the ratings enormously.